Wellington Mara always said, once a giant, always a giant. For me, it's only a giant.
Giants fans, welcome back to another episode of Only a Giant. Thanks so much for being here. I got a lot to talk about today. First and foremost, if you could please like and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Just trying to help grow the podcast a little bit. Not looking for anything crazy here, but any growth is always good growth. So if you could please like and subscribe. Second, I would like to thank my buddy Eric Shear, who put together that little intro video. Eric, really appreciate that, man. Great work. Love everything you do for me. Thanks so much. So here we are, guys. One day away from the first preseason game of the year, which is crazy. You know, time flies when you're having fun, I guess. Joint practices have been a blast. Training camp has been a blast. This is probably the best coverage that I've seen of training camp in, well, maybe ever, quite honestly. And that probably has a lot to do with social media and people seem to be recording practices, plays in practice a lot more than they ever used to, which I don't think they were allowed to before. So that may be part of it. I don't think they're allowed to now, but maybe they're allowing it now. I'm not sure. But it's been awesome to see. Obviously, all the coverage with joint practices also has been awesome. Love the live reviews afterward with like the Talking Giants guys and stuff like that. Love watching that. A lot of good information, a lot of unbiased information too, I think, which is always good to see as well. So where do we start with kind of everything going on here? I guess we'll just start right away with the joint practices. And what do you take away from the joint practices? Obviously, the intensity, the fights, the fines. Giants and the Lions were just fined. Organizations were fined $200,000 apiece for the fights in training camp. And honestly, I think both teams walk away smiling because, from the Lions' perspective, they held their intensity like they always do, and from the Giants' perspective, they kind of matched the intensity. Now, obviously, you don't love to see fights. I'll never say that you do, but they're going to happen. It's unfortunately, especially with joint practices, tempers flare a little bit. Everyone's competing. You're trying to compete for a job in a lot of scenarios, and emotions run high. It's hot. You're getting tired. It's going to happen, man. It's going to happen. Luckily, I would say that none of it was really too egregious, too crazy. It was all pretty much pushing and shoving, other than some punches thrown by Malik and this Joseph Cat and Devin Singletary coming flying and tomahawking people. So some interesting stuff there. But biggest thing I took away from the joint practices, obviously the intensity. We matched it, which is huge. It's awesome to see a team that really kind of came out flat last year in training camp with these joint practices, and an indicator of what was to come. I think with week one, where we just got punched in the face, had no response, and really it kind of derailed the whole season. Obviously, week two, you go down, what was it, 28-0 right away, and you kind of come back and battle back and end up winning that game, but the rest of the season, man, was just an uphill climb. Obviously, a lot of factors, kind of contributed to that. Injuries, bad luck, kind of just everything that could have went against us last year went against us. But it was nice to see us match the intensity, not be afraid of, frankly, a great team in the NFC who's probably going to be a contender for that top spot in the NFC. Good to see that we were able to match the intensity, have great practices against them. Malik Neighbors looked like an absolute stud. Offensive line held up fairly good. Defensive line, got some pressure. All good things to see. Biggest thing I would say is Jermaine Illuminor kind of held down that right tackle position. Yeah, he may have given up some pressures, and maybe there were a couple sacks mixed in. I don't know. But he held it down. He didn't make a fool of himself. Guards seem to do the same thing. Van Roten seemed to be okay at center. Andrew Thomas is Andrew Thomas. Looked like John Runyon, held up the spot down at left guard as well. All good things. All good things. Obviously, Daniel Jones looked good for the most part. Little things here and there, but overall, I think he held his own in camp. Makes you wonder how much we're going to force the ball to Malik Neighbors all year. Is he going to have 10, 12 targets a game? It seems like Daniel Jones kind of locked into him a lot. And you don't blame him. It's good to see that we have a receiver that we can get the ball to, that we can actually force the ball to a little bit and maybe get some production out of that wide receiver one position where, you look at years prior, Isaiah Hodgins was wide receiver one last year, or Darius Slayton maybe. But, Hodgins is fourth on the depth chart now, fifth on the depth chart now. Like, what a change. What's going to happen with that, though? Where's the wide receiver position going to go? Who's going to stick? Who's going to stay? And who's not going to? I think the other big thing I took away from joint practices was Nick McLeod taking over as a cornerback 2. And what does that mean? Cordell Flott was benched. Does Nick McLeod take over that cornerback 2 position and hold on to it for good? Do they bring somebody in still to allow McLeod to kind of bounce around, play a little bit outside, play a little bit slot, play a little bit as that like money backer or whatever, linebacker position he was kind of playing there in special defenses. The other thing I would say that I really took away from these joint practices is the team really seemed to match the intensity of the lines, but they also kind of matched the intensity of Brian Daboll. Guys, keep in mind, this is his third year, going into his third year as a head coach. He was never a head coach before. So year one, getting your feet wet. Year two, you make the playoffs. You kind of think, hey, I got this down. This is kind of easy. Maybe we have a little bit of a softer training camp and preseason to limit injuries, and clearly that didn't go well. So this year, okay, hey, that didn't work last year. Maybe we need to kind of up the intensity a little bit. And it seems like that's what's happening right now. Is the intensity is being raised. But also it seems like the team is kind of responding to Brian Daboll having more of a hands-on role with this team. The previous years it was Wink, go do your thing with the defense. Brian Kafka do your thing with the offense, and I'm gonna kind of manage the overall flow of the practice and have my input here and there. But never seemed like he was running the offense, which I guess he wasn't. Maybe it was his offense that was being installed, but Mike Kafka was running the offense. This year, it seems like there's a whole new intensity with the offense. The offense seems to be running through Brian Daboll, and hey, it should at this point, especially if he's going to be calling plays. So that's something else I noticed there that I think could be interesting to watch. Now, let's get into the preseason game. Week 1, Detroit Lions tomorrow. I believe it's 8 o'clock Eastern. It sounded like CW or something weird like that when I looked it up. But what am I going to focus on with this preseason game? And I'm not really going to give you, hey, like, I'm going to focus on this player or, that player. I'm going to give you a little bit more of a broader view of what I'm going to look at. So first thing I'm going to look at, kick returners. Who's doing the kick returning? Who's doing a good job with it? Can I hear Asante hold on to the ball if he gets a couple cracks at it? Is it Isaiah McKenzie that's going to win that job, or is it Gunnar Olszewski that's going to win that? And how does it overall look? How does Michael Gabriel look as a special teams coordinator? Do we look outmatched? Can we spark something, get a couple of good returns, and are our guys understanding the rules? These are all going to kind of be things that'll be interesting with Gabriel being a first-time special teams coordinator. First game, do the players understand the rules that they have, and are they adhering to it? And I think that'll just be interesting to see how it looks overall. Obviously we saw it with the Hall of Fame game, but you really didn't see much. It was kind of boring, to be completely honest with you. What happens from there? Next thing I think I'm really going to focus on is the halfback room. Obviously, Singletary's running back 1. I don't care about that. That is what it is. He might not even play. But what's running back 2 look like? Is that Tyrone Tracy? Is Eric Gray, who may not play, could be in concussion protocol? Does Dante Miller have an inside track of kind of making the roster over Eric Gray? Does Eric Gray have a chance to be cut? Tyrone Tracy looks like the real deal so far, but it's got to translate to game day. Practice is one thing. Practice is, you can do everything you want in practice, but you gotta translate it to the field on game day. So how does Tyrone Tracy look? How does Dante Turbo Miller look? Is he as fast as advertised? Is he a sneaky pick that we got as an undrafted guy with kind of a weird circumstance? Definitely something I'm going to be focusing on there. Really, Tyrone Tracy and Dante Turbo Miller, and if Eric Gray plays, what's his role? Is he going to be that running back too? Is he going to get the first crack at it, or is he in concussion protocol and not going to play? I'm actually kind of waiting today. I was hoping that we would hear, who's going to play, who's not. Haven't heard anything yet. Maybe that'll come a little bit later after I record this, and I'll be kicking myself. but we'll see. Next thing I'm going to focus on is the backup quarterback position. Now, I'm not focusing in on it as if I expect Tommy DeVito to beat out Drew Lock. I don't. Drew Lock is a backup quarterback at this point. But what does Tommy DeVito look like? Is he maturing? Is he growing as a player? Does he look like somebody that maybe next year could take over that backup position and be reliable? So I guess really how I'm looking at this is, how does he stack up? How does he look compared to Drew Lock? Drew Lock in training camp, I think from everything I've heard, hasn't looked great, but he's a backup. It is what it is. But how does he look, and how does Tommy DeVito kind of stack up to how Drew Lock looks? And is there some similarities? Has Tommy DeVito grown as a player, and can he make some of those throws that were maybe last year he wasn't? Can he do that this year? Now that could be a change in the offensive scheme as well, where they really seem to be pushing the ball a lot more this year. Which game one when DeVito played, was that Green Bay? I believe last year, where he was really pushing the ball downfield, and then it just seemed like he wasn't aggressive at all after that. I don't know if that was Mike Kafka, if that was Brian Dable or what, but it really seems like the focus on training camp this year has been push the ball downfield, and I love it. And I think that could kind of benefit DeVito and Locke, but we'll see. How does that look, though? I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. What else, guys? Backup wide receivers. I'm not looking at Malik Neighbors. I don't assume that he's going to play unless maybe Daniel Jones does, but I have a feeling he won't. Does Wandell play? Does Jalen Hyatt play? I think Hyatt should play. I think Hyatt and Slayton both should play, even if it's just backups, just to get some reps, get some work. Maybe Slayton, we kind of already know who Slayton is, but I think it would be beneficial at least to have that veteran out there with Drew Lock for a little bit, and then kind of rotate out. But what I'm really focusing on, I think, the most is Allen Robinson versus somebody like Isaiah Hodgins. What is Hodgins going to do on this team? Does he still have a role? Is he somebody that can contribute still, or does Allen Robinson's veteran presence and the help that he's been working with Jalen Hyatt, does he have more of a role in this team than maybe we thought? You brought in Allen Robinson, and you really didn't think much of it, just a camp body. But, guys, he was a good wide receiver, a productive wide receiver. When we got Kenny Golladay, it was like him and Allen Robinson that we were looking at, like, hey, who are we going to get? Who's going to be that big wide receiver one that we're going to get in that year? And it ended up being Kenny Golladay, unfortunately, I guess. But maybe Allen Robinson wasn't any better. But that's not the point. The veteran leadership that he can provide still seems like he has some gas in the tank. Does Allen Robinson have a role in this team? Does one of those guys get traded? There's injuries recently to Rondell Moore with the Atlanta Falcons and Josh Downs with the Colts. Does someone like one of those two, or even Darius Slayton, who I don't think you trade him, but do one of those guys get looked at as a possible trade candidate for a cornerback two, or maybe some more draft compensation, or a center? Who really knows what could happen there. Other things I'm looking at: Miles Boykin. Is he just a special teamer? Is he a wide receiver as well? What's his role going to be on this team? I know they like him in special teams. Is there any other guys that can contribute on special teams to where maybe that roster spot becomes expendable? We'll see. We'll see on that. Where does Ayer Asante stack up versus Bryce Ford Wheaton? It's another thing I'm going to be watching. I think Bryce Ford Wheaton would have more of a shot to make the team over Ayer Asante, but does Bryce Ford Wheaton even have a chance to make this roster? Is he going to be a practice squad guy, and maybe he gets some call ups with some injuries or something like that? I know the team had kind of a steady beat from last year, but maybe it's really more like Bryce Ford Wheaton versus Miles Boykin, with the special team side of it. I don't know. I think that's something that's going to be interesting and probably a part that I'm going to be looking at a lot. What else? Probably going to be focusing on the O line, obviously. But what I think I'll really be more focusing on is what does Jake Kubas do? Is he the second string offensive line on the second string offensive line as a guard? Does he get any reps at center? Center is still kind of a weird position where obviously you have John Michael Schmitz, but is Greg Van Roten really a backup center? Is Schlotman or O'Shawn, who are the other centers on this team, or who else can take snaps? Obviously, you really don't want your left guard doing that, which we did a little bit in camp with John Runyon, but I'd much rather have Greg Van Roten doing that as a backup center / right guard on this offensive line. But does Jake Kubas get any snaps there? Does he take a few snaps, towards the end, latter part of the week, and what happens there, or the week of the game, and does he do well at it? Does he perform like a second team offensive lineman? He came in as an undrafted free agent, but it really seems like in camp he's kind of been holding his own, which has been good. Exciting to see, and excited to see maybe we could actually develop somebody. Maybe this Carmen Brusello guy is actually a good offensive line coach, and maybe Bobby Johnson was an issue. I think there's a lot of people that are saying Bobby Johnson really wasn't that bad. It was just the players sucked, and who knows. But I think it'll be interesting to see if we can actually develop somebody. Other things I'm looking at: defensive line, Jordan Riley. How does he look? Does he look like he belongs? I'm assuming he'll play, and does he dominate? Is he somebody that can play on the first team potentially, or at least as like a big rotational guy? There are some other guys that I may focus in on with the defensive line, but honestly, Jordan Riley is probably the guy I'm looking at the most. And then Deontay Johnson as that middle linebacker too. Does he have a chance to win that? Is he a more prototypical linebacker where some of the other guys that we have maybe aren't? How does he look? What's he doing? Can he drop back in coverage if we need to? Is he filling his run assignments, run gaps, stuff of that nature? I'm really going to focus in on him a lot. He might play a lot, honestly, tomorrow with some injuries and stuff of that nature. So definitely going to be focusing in on him. Next is, or maybe last for the preseason stuff I'm really going to be focusing in on is the safety room. A cornerback, obviously, that'll be something that I kind of look at, but I don't know what's going to happen there. So safety-wise, does Tyler Nubin get some runs with the ones? Are the ones even going to play? What does Tyler Nubin look like? Where's Javarius Owens fit in? Because he has kind of looked good in camp, and someone that I think might be worth getting some run with, maybe the ones in this game or the twos or something of that nature. And how does he look? What's the communication look like? I think that's been the big thing that I've seen with the joint practices is the communication with the safeties has been a little bit lacking, and that's something that has kind of shown with some of the broken coverage deep touchdowns from Jared Goff. Where is that coming from? Is that something with Dane Belton? Is it Tyler Nubin? Is it Pinnock, what's happening there? So what does a rotation look like? Who's kind of getting the burn with the ones, with the twos, with the threes? Who's making plays? And I guess the other thing I'm kind of curious about is, does Jalen Mills still have a spot on this roster? My inclination right now is probably yes, because I think the safety room is so young that we need a little bit more of a veteran presence, and I think he can provide that. Is it always going to be the prettiest? No, but like if he can kind of settle down the safety room for a year and contribute and be part of the 3 or 4 man rotation or something of that nature, and provide some of that kind of veteran stability where we don't really, our safety room is so young. Maybe Jalen Mills can provide that. Maybe he's gone. I want to say he's gone because I love a lot of the young guys that we have. I really liked Javarius Owens last year. I wish he had gotten more of a chance. Obviously, I was pretty excited about drafting Tyler Nubin. You gotta like Pinnock, and you like the production that Dane Belton has shown when he's on the field, but we can't have breakdowns. That stuff is very important. The safety room has to be in sync. It's very important in Shane Bowen's defense to have safeties that can communicate, that can know their assignments, that can line up in the right position. Those are all things that are very important in this defense. We'll have a good pass rush, I think, with Brian Burns, who we've barely even spoken about at this point. How did I not bring him up already? Joint practices, just domination. Love to see it. How does that translate to game day? Probably not going to play tomorrow. He might play a little bit in preseason, but I don't know how much. But overall, I'm just looking to, compete in this preseason game. I don't care if we win, if we lose. I just want to come out feeling pretty good about an offense that can move the ball a little bit. Some backup offensive linemen that can produce, some safeties that can, protect the back end of the defense and make some plays. Going to be a fun game, though, guys. Giants football is back. Holy hell, man, I'm just excited to be out there and actually see the Giants in action. I'm telling you what, Friday I'll be watching that game 3 or 4 times, 4 or 5 times, who knows. I'll be watching that game pretty closely to see kind of, focused on some specific stuff. Because obviously game day, when the game's actually watching, maybe you rewind it a little bit, but I'm going to be kind of paying attention to the game as a whole and just enjoying it as a fan, focusing on little things. But then afterward, I'll really kind of go back and try to watch it and focus in on specific positions, specific players, see who stood out and who didn't, who's going to lose a roster spot, based off of this game. Especially now because the preseason games are definitely a little bit more reversed, I think, to how it used to be with 4 preseason games. Game 1 was no starters almost ever played. Game 2, you'd get a series, maybe 2, maybe a quarter. Game 3, you're playing the first half at the minimum, maybe 3 quarters, and game 4, nothing. Now it's like game 1, probably no starters. Game 2, you're going to get starters. Game 3, you might get starters for a little bit more. It just depends on the situation. Like Joe Burrow, maybe game 3, nothing. But Danny Jones might, at that point, because he does need the work. That's all I got for the preseason game tomorrow against the Detroit Lions. End of the day, hopefully you come out no injuries. Obviously, unfortunately, injuries happen. Who's it going to be? Hopefully it's not any of the major pieces, but we'll see what happens. After that, I really hope to see Evan Neal start to get some work, whether that's at guard, whether that's at tackle. Guys, even if he doesn't start at tackle throughout the year, I wouldn't be shocked to see him rotate in a little bit here and there. But right now, it really is Jermaine Luminor's job to lose, I think, at this point. Last thing I really want to talk about, and I'll kind of keep this brief, is Hard Knocks. What's there really to say at this point that hasn't already been said? Obviously, I'm a little bit late to the party with talking about it, but I loved it. It was a blast to watch, especially with it being your own team. Kind of, having your cake and eating it too, or whatever you want to call that. Awesome to see. The last episode was a little bit of a puff piece, but I think it just kind of wrapped up everything in general really well. Awesome to see the scouting, kind of the other side of it. Joe Shane, I think, was amazing in it and really kind of the perfect guy for the first time ever, off-season Hard Knocks with the draft, with free agency, kind of a perfect fit for it, quite honestly. I think moving forward, I think you might struggle to find other GMs and other teams that really want to do this because obviously way more information was given out than maybe expected, but end of the day, it was an amazing product. I think there's definitely going to be a steady drumbeat to do it again with some other teams. And you want to know what? I love it. I love watching it. I love the little insider draft nuggets that you get out of it, and maybe the inner workings of trades and stuff of that nature. I don't care if it's the Dallas Cowboys. I'll watch that next year. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see if another team actually is willing to do it and who is willing to do it. It's going to have to be kind of a more, younger, progressive GM. Maybe the Commanders do it next year. That could be kind of cool, depending on how the season goes for them. I don't see a lot of other blue blood kind of teams doing that. I don't see the Green Bay Packers doing it or the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Dallas Cowboys doing it. But we'll see. Yeah, I think it is very cool to see, very unique. But I hope there is another team that is willing to do it next year. What's next, guys? For me specifically, obviously we're going to be watching the preseason game tomorrow. I may get a video out over the weekend, just kind of breaking down that preseason game. Maybe I'll even have it out on Friday. Who knows? I am going to North Carolina next week. Leave on Monday. Won't be back until Sunday. So probably will not have a video out previewing preseason week 2. But I'll definitely get a reaction out reviewing the game and preparing for week 3 of preseason. And that's why I might get a video out kind of early, maybe Friday or Saturday at some point to kind of discuss what happens, especially with that preseason game against the Detroit Lions. Other than that, guys, been a blast talking to you. Please like and subscribe. Appreciate all of you for listening. Let's go Big Blue, baby. We're back. Let's go. Thanks, guys.